It is 6:47 a.m. in Mexico City, and you are sitting at a table near the window of your apartment in Colonia, Roma, and the coffee in your cup has gone cold. And outside, a street vendor is setting up his cart with the particular unhurried rhythm of someone who has done the same thing every morning for 20 years. And you were looking at your phone because your editor has sent you a draft to review, and the draft is about Tamaulipas, and something in the words, a street name, Avenida Guerrero, just a street name, has pulled you under. This happens. You've learned to wait it out. You are 51 years old. You were a journalist who covered organized crime in Tamaulipas for 11 years. You are alive. These three facts exist together in a way that still surprises you sometimes, on mornings like this one, when the coffee goes cold before you remember to drink it. You started at El Mañana de Nuevo Laredo at 24. Your editor was a man named Rodrigo. 3 rotating button-down shirts, a bottle of antacids on his desk, worn smooth from handling. On your first day, he told you that covering crime in Tamaulipas required distancia emocional, emotional distance, the ability to write about a severed head found outside a primary school with the same flat precision you'd apply to a city council vote. You learned the distance. You didn't know yet what it would cost you. Tamaulipas sits on the U.S.-Mexico border, Nuevo Laredo facing Laredo, Matamoros facing Brownsville, Reynosa facing McAllen. The Rio Grande crossings there moved an estimated $64 billion in drug revenue annually into the United States, according to DEA intelligence assessments later entered into congressional testimony. When the Gulf Cartel fractured in 2010, and its armed wing, Los Zetas, broke off and became a rival organization, Tamaulipas became a war zone. 2 organizations, 1 border. A geography worth more per mile than almost anywhere else on the continent. You covered the war, from inside it, through police contacts, municipal sources, and people who found you in parking lots at midnight with envelopes they needed to exist in print. You built a network of people who trusted you because they had watched you, in 2014, sit across from state investigators who threatened you with obstruction charges and decline, without raising your voice, to give up a single name. Word of that traveled in networks you couldn't see but could feel. The Committee to Protect Journalists has documented what the decade looked like from the outside. Between 2010 and 2020, Mexico became the deadliest country in the world for journalists outside active war zones. In 2017 alone, 12 journalists were killed. In 2022, 19. More than Afghanistan, more than Ukraine. You know these numbers the way a cardiologist knows mortality rates, clinically, as context for your own continued heartbeat. The first threat came in 2013, a message to the paper's general mailbox. Tell your reporters to choose their stories more carefully. Rodrigo showed it to you, neither alarmed nor dismissive. You published the story anyway. Municipal police officers on Los Zetas' payroll, backed by documents from a source you've never named and never will. Nothing happened. Silence after a threat is its own kind of information. The second threat, in 2015, was a photograph left under your windshield wiper. Your daughter, 8 years old, walking to school. Her name written on the back in ballpoint pen. The route she walked. You sat in the parking lot for a long time, looking at it. Then you photographed it, reported it to the State Attorney General's office, which logged it and did nothing, which you knew would happen. And that evening, you called your sister in Monterey. Your daughter grew up there, finished school there, university there. She has a daughter of her own now, 4 years old, who has never lived in Nuevo Laredo. This is not in any CPJ report. It's just what happened. You kept working. There was a journalist named Sandra. You knew her the way you know people in the same profession in the same dangerous place. Not intimately, but with the specific gravity of 2 people who understand what the other is carrying without needing to explain it. She had started her own digital publication after the traditional papers stopped running her stories. She was investigating land seizures in southern Tamaulipas. Los Zetas had been systematically dispossessing farming communities, acquiring land through violence and fraudulent legal instruments, laundering money through legitimate agricultural operations. 8 months of work. Sources inside the land registry office. Documents. The last time you saw Sandra was 3 weeks before she died, at a press conference neither of you had wanted to attend. You were both leaving at the same time, and she stopped on the steps and said, without particular drama, that she thought she was close to finishing the land piece. She said it the way reporters say things when they've been living inside a story long enough that it's become part of their internal weather. I think I'm almost there. You said something encouraging. You don't remember what. You do remember that she looked tired, in the particular way that has nothing to do with sleep. On a Saturday morning in 2017, she was shot twice in her car outside a convenience store 2 blocks from her apartment. The land story was never published in complete form. Fragmentary versions appeared in international outlets afterward, assembled from recovered files, but the full investigation died with her. The farming families whose land was seized are still without their land. You spoke at Sandra's memorial. You looked at her photograph and did the arithmetic you had been doing since 2013. You added her name to a list. You understood the list was not going to stop growing. You went back to the office the following Monday and filed a story about a cartel-connected municipal official in Reynosa. What else do? You do the work. That's all there is. There are 3 things that kept you alive. You've tried to explain them at journalism schools in Mexico City, to press freedom organizations, to reporters in other countries who are beginning to understand what it means to cover power that doesn't tolerate coverage. The first was information asymmetry. The war between Los Zetas and the Gulf Cartel created a surplus of people who needed their version of events told. Defectors, mid-level operators who felt cheated, family members of internally executed men. They found you because you had a documented record of protecting sources under actual pressure. Trust in this environment is transactional and specific. You had proven what you would and wouldn't do under cost. The second was utility. At some point, you became worth more to certain factions alive than dead, not because they respected the press, but because your reporting reached federal authorities and international outlets, and your existence as a functioning reporter created a channel that served certain informational interests. When one organization wanted something known publicly, a rival's betrayal, a corrupt official's dealings, the information would arrive at your door somehow. You reported only what you independently verified. You are not their instrument. But you were not unwelcome to everyone in the ecosystem either. This is a moral complexity journalism schools don't teach. You haven't finished processing it yourself. The third was visible unpredictability. Different routes, different hours, different beds, the office some nights, a friend's couch some nights, a budget hotel in a different neighborhood some nights, different borrowed cars. You did this not because you'd been trained in security protocols, but because something in you understood that pattern is death, that the only approximation of armor available to you was to be impossible to schedule. In 2018, on a Thursday in February, a cell operating for Cartel del Noreste, the organization that emerged after Los Zetas' own fragmentation, was assigned a contracted job in Nuevo Laredo. The target was a journalist at El Mañana. You didn't know this on that Thursday. You learned it 3 months later, from a source inside CDN who mentioned it in the margins of a conversation about something else. The cell had been redirected mid-operation. A rival had been located. Priorities shifted. You were, in the bureaucratic language of the organization, deprioritized. 3 months after that, your source was found in a drainage canal outside Reynosa. He had been reported by someone in his own cell. Before the nature of his work made personal requests complicated, he had told you to use his real name if you ever wrote about him. He said it with the dark humor of a man who understood the odds. You wrote a brief story. You used his name. You have never written publicly about that Thursday until now. The coffee on the table in Colonia Roma is still cold. Outside, the street vendor has finished setting up. The morning is becoming ordinary in the way mornings do, indifferent to whatever is happening inside the apartments above the street. You moved to Mexico City in 2019, not because of a final threat, no ultimatum arrived, no moment of clarity. You did a calculation. The organizations had fragmented further, and fragmentation makes the environment less predictable. The informal understandings that had never been reliable but had provided loose structure were dissolving. Journalists who had survived by being too visible to kill quietly were being killed loudly. The math had changed. So you changed cities. You kept working. The question comes at the end of every panel, every interview, every conversation with reporters in other countries who are starting to feel the temperature rising in their own places. How do you keep going? The honest answer, the one you've arrived at after running out of patience for the cleaner versions, is this. You kept going because you knew too much to stop. Not in the dangerous sense, in the weight-bearing sense. Every source who came to you in a parking lot at midnight was transferring something to you. Not just information, but obligation. The weight of what they risked to tell you. The weight of what they needed to exist in print. When Sandra died, her 8 months of work, her sources in the land registry office, her documents, some of that transferred too. Not to you specifically, but to the profession, to the function, to whoever was still standing. You were still standing. The structures that made her death possible are still operational. The officials whose names are in documents you've reviewed are still in office. The farming families in southern Tamaulipas are still without their land. The story doesn't stop needing to be told because you stopped telling it. That's not heroism. That's just arithmetic. Your daughter calls on Sundays. Your granddaughter is 4 years old and does not know what you do for work, in the way children don't know things that haven't been explained yet. Someday she'll be old enough. You haven't decided what you'll say. The faces don't stop. Sandra on the steps of the press conference, tired in the way that has nothing to do with sleep. Rodrigo, who retired in 2020 and died of a heart attack in 2021, still wearing his 3 shirts. Your source in the drainage canal. The farming families. Your daughter at 8 years old, walking to school on a route that was written in ballpoint pen on the back of a photograph by someone who wanted you to understand what was possible. You carry them. That's what there is. You carry them, and you keep working. And on mornings when a street name in someone else's draft pulls you under for a few minutes, you wait until the surface returns. And then you pick up the phone and you do your job. The coffee is cold. You get up and make more. The work is still there when you come back. The statistics cited, journalist death tolls in Mexico, Cartel territorial economics, are drawn from CPJ Annual Impunity Index reports, Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index 2017 to 2023, and DEA congressional testimony on Gulf Cartel revenue. El Mañana de Nuevo Laredo is a real publication that has faced documented threats and attacks. The narrative is constructed from the composite documented experiences of journalists who covered organized crime in Tamaulipas, among them Candido Rios, Miroslava Breach, and the staff of El Mañana, several of whom did not survive.